You are sitting in a doctor's office right now because 10,000 years ago, someone figured out that a specific leaf reduced fever. They didn't know why. They had no framework for infection, no concept of bacteria, no understanding of how the body worked at any level we would recognize today. They just noticed something, tried it, and it worked often enough that someone told someone else. That chain of observation never broke. It runs uninterrupted from that moment to the pill you took this morning. The question of what ancient humans did when they got sick is not a question about primitive behavior. It is a question about the beginning of the longest experiment in human history. And what they did is stranger, more sophisticated, and more familiar than most people expect. Start with what getting sick actually meant 100,000 years ago. There were no hospitals, no doctors, no concept of medicine as a category separate from everything else. When a member of a group became ill, the group faced a specific problem. A sick person cannot hunt, cannot gather, cannot carry, cannot defend. In a group of 20 to 30 people living on the edge of survival, one sick body was a weight the whole group carried. The response to illness was not personal, it was collective. This is the first thing that surprises people. Ancient humans did not leave their sick behind. The fossil record proves it. Researchers studying Neanderthal remains, a species that lived alongside early humans and shared significant behavioral overlap, found individuals who had survived serious injuries and degenerative diseases for years. A 45,000-year-old skeleton discovered in Shanidar Cave in Iraq showed a man who had lived for decades with a withered arm, a damaged eye socket, and severe arthritis. He could not have survived alone. Someone fed him. Someone kept him warm. Someone stayed. The care of the sick is not a modern invention. It is one of the oldest behaviors we have evidence of. But care without knowledge has limits, so ancient humans did what humans always do when they don't understand something. They watched, they tested, they remembered. The first medicine was observation. Someone with a fever ate a specific plant and the fever broke. Someone with a wound pressed a particular leaf against it and the bleeding slowed. These were not random guesses. Hunter-gatherer groups had encyclopedic knowledge of their local environments built across generations. They knew which animals ate which plants when they were injured. They knew which plants caused vomiting in large doses and which caused sleep. The line between food, poison, and medicine in the ancient world was not a line at all. It was a spectrum, and ancient humans navigated it constantly. Archaeologists have found evidence of medicinal plant use stretching back at least 60,000 years. In the same Shanidar cave where the arthritic man was found, researchers discovered pollen of 8 plant species clustered around the burial site. Several of those plants are still used in traditional medicine today. The specific combination suggested deliberate placement, not accident. Someone chose those plants. Someone knew what they were for. The body itself was also a tool for diagnosis in ways that were more accurate than they had any right to be. Ancient healers, and there were healers, specialized individuals whose role was the treatment of illness, read the body through observation. Color of the skin, texture of the tongue, temperature of specific areas, smell of breath and waste, speed and pattern of breathing. These were not superstitions, they were data. Jaundice yellows the skin because the liver is failing. A specific smell on the breath signals metabolic crisis. Ancient healers did not know the mechanisms, but they recognized the patterns, and pattern recognition, applied consistently across generations, produces something that starts to look like knowledge. The spiritual dimension was real and inseparable from the practical. When observation failed, when the plant didn't work, when the fever climbed instead of breaking, ancient humans did not conclude that medicine was useless. They concluded that something else was involved, something beyond the physical. Illness that did not respond to physical treatment was interpreted as a disruption of a different order. The shaman, the healer, the ritual specialist, these figures existed in virtually every ancient culture independently discovered across every continent. Their methods varied, the underlying logic did not. The body and whatever animated it were not separate. Treating one without addressing the other was incomplete. This is not as irrational as it sounds. Stress kills. Isolation kills. Belief in recovery measurably improves outcomes, a mechanism so reliable that modern medicine built an entire control methodology around accounting for it. The placebo effect is not a trick. It is the body responding to expectation. Ancient healers who combined plant medicine with ritual, with community, with the restoration of social belonging were doing something more complete than they knew. The song sung over the sick person was not nothing. The gathering of the group around the ill member was not nothing. These were interventions. They worked through mechanisms ancient humans couldn't name, but the outcomes were real enough to preserve the practice across thousands of generations. Trepanation is the most dramatic evidence of ancient surgical intervention, the deliberate drilling or scraping of a hole through the human skull, performed as far back as 7,000 years ago across cultures in Europe, South America, and Africa, with no contact between them. Skulls have been found with multiple trepanation holes at different stages of healing, meaning the patient survived the first procedure, recovered, and underwent it again. The survival rates, given the absence of anesthesia and sterile conditions, were higher than anyone initially expected. Researchers examining the bone growth around ancient trepanation sites found healing that required months of survival post-surgery. These people did not die on the table. Someone kept them alive through recovery. What ancient humans did when they got sick is what humans have always done. They stayed together. They watched carefully. They tried everything available to them and remembered what worked. They built systems of knowledge so durable that fragments of them survived intact for tens of thousands of years into a world those original observers could not have imagined. The willow bark that ancient healers used to reduce fever contains salicin. The active compound derived from salicin is called salicylic acid. The synthesized version of salicylic acid was patented in 1999 under a brand name you know, aspirin. The chain from the person who first noticed that willow bark reduced fever to the tablet dissolving in your stomach right now is unbroken. It passed through every generation between them. It survived every collapse, every plague, every dark age. It survived because the knowledge was useful and because the humans carrying it never stopped passing it forward. They got sick. They paid attention. They told someone. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough.